Right out. The NFLPA comes out with their grading system on these teams. Do you buy it? Are you into it at all, or you just say, oh, it's one of those surveys?
No, I think there's a lot to buy into it because, this is players giving their honest opinion of their, and I think everyone has to take into account that this is about the workplace environment. That's what the NFLPA is surveying. And obviously it came out of the blue last year when they did it for the first time. And now there's a comparison. And, we've seen teams improve. Some teams get worse. And the Cardinals were a little better than they were last year. But I think it opens some eyes, guys, when you see, like the Chiefs, for example, who, basically rated their owner the same as the Cardinals players rated Michael Bidwell, that they don't have confidence that they want to invest money in the facilities. And so I think there's something to be said, for it. And they make a lot of effort with this. There were over 1,700 players, that responded. That's a pretty big number when you look at it that way. And I think, I know I saw J.J. Watt had a tweet yesterday where he said, there's a lot of votes that players do. And sometimes with Pro Bowl, they vote for friends or this and that. But what he said was the players took this seriously. And I think it should be, because it really opens eyes to, in a lot of cases, what the differing, facilities are. When you have a Miami and a Minnesota that have both been 1-2, one of them was 1 and the other 2 last year, then it flipped this year. But they both have new facilities that have been built in the last 5 to 7 years, which are state of the art. And then you have others that still have the same facilities they've had for 2 decades and maybe upgrade a little here and there. But heck, the Cardinals locker room, guys, I've been in it, a lot of times over the last 2 years, their locker room is not even big enough for all the players to have a locker in the same room, in the same area. They have an auxiliary locker room. So that's kind of some of the things that exist in the NFL.
And I'd be curious, like our State 48 Roofing Issue Call question today, it kind of addresses that issue with free agency and states, will the Cardinals' current ranking of the 27th worst team voted on by the players affect free agents wanting to play for them? And it's either yes, proves bad franchise, or no, money conquers issues, that being the contracts. Currently, it's at 50-50 as far as those folks voting at Rockamanuch on Twitter. Do you kind of throw that at some of these free agents or some of the guys that are walking around, how important that is or is not, as long as they're getting paid?
Well, I think it can be. There's no evidence yet. I don't think that you can see where it has a huge impact. But, we know that players talk to each other. And they, say, if you're on the Dolphins, you're on the Vikings, you're telling other players in the league, man, we have these incredible facilities. But obviously in free agency, there's more that goes into it. In terms of, the team, how good is the team, those things, what's the money? And obviously money talks. But so I think it's hard to judge at this point how much of an impact, that has. And the other point is this: when you look at free agents, right? Like say the unrestricted free agents that come free every year, there's only about, let's look at the top 100. The top 100, probably have a certain amount of choice of where to go. But that's only 100 out of, a lot of players in this league. So I think it can have somewhat of an effect. But I think overall, a lot of times guys are going to go where the money is. Yeah. And guys are going to go where, they've heard about the coach. I thought it was pretty significant that the rating that Jonathan Gannon got.
Yeah.
Especially being rated 12th in the NFL in listening to his players and being collaborative and things like that. And I thought that was a big positive, especially when you had, some people, if you guys remember, a certain writer for a certain website, trashed, Jonathan Gannon after that, 5-second video clip was put on social media where he made a couple of comments and he was saying, oh, this guy can't motivate players, players won't respect him, and all that. Well, obviously we see that a lot of the players respect Jonathan Gannon as a person, including them and, being collaborative and, and all those things. So I think that's at least one positive, to take away from this. And a lot of times that can say a lot also about free agents. Guys talk about, hey, this guy's only in his first year, but he's a great coach to play for. And that can have sometimes just as big an impact as some of the facilities. And And so you like to go to a place that has incredible facilities. But what I think is going to be interesting, guys, over the next X number of years, how many of these teams, like the Chiefs, like the Cardinals, who have substandard facilities, are going to feel that we've got to do something about this, to bring it up to standard. I mean, we saw Jacksonville last year. I think they were in the 20s because they had an old facility. And then they built a new facility that opened just before training camp, and all of a sudden they ranked 5th overall. So that kind of shows, and you just wonder what some of these teams near the bottom in their facilities are going to do about it in the upcoming years. Now, I have heard the Cardinals are working on doing something about the locker room, so we'll see how that plays out.
Howard, when you sit back and you would try to assess everything that's going on right now in Indianapolis, is it a case in point now where the so-called top picks, like first-round picks, they don't even need to go there other than to do testing, medical testing, and interviews? And then everybody else, it's important then for them to go and do the workout. Are we now at that point or not?
Well, yeah, I think we are. And I don't know if it's just first-round picks. Now, you can probably narrow it down to the guys who are really at the top of the first round. And when you come to quarterbacks, a lot of times with the way the workout is set up at the combine with throwing the football, it's not an optimum system, for throwing the ball when you might get out there and throw 6 passes, go to the back of the line, and 20 minutes later you throw another 6. And they'd much rather do it at the pro day where they can orchestrate it. So the top guys at those positions, they're going to be there, but or they're they'll be there, but they won't be doing a lot of those drills, and quarterbacks won't be doing throwing. But after that, every guy wants to improve his stock, and you just never know where you're going to go. Are you going to? I mean, I'll tell you something, guys. There's a big difference between being a last half of the first round pick and the first half of the second round pick. There's a big difference in terms of what your first contract is, and so I think those guys realize that they've got to do basically all they can to, who knows, maybe move into that top of the first round instead of being at the top of the second round, or maybe be a third round pick instead of a 5th round pick. So I think there will always be, and there have been for a number of years, guys who don't work out and do some of the things. But for the most part, the huge majority do it because they realize what's at stake in terms of the overall draft evaluation process.
And I think the other side of that is, I think of Bo Nix. There's one of the top quarterbacks coming out of the draft that's there doing everything, anything, and then some. Speaks volumes for him, at least I feel, in that regard.
Well, yeah, but I think, when you look at him, and some of the other guys in his area, right, after the, quote, top 3 guys that everybody thinks the way it's going to go, that next group of quarterbacks, they're figuring, hey, I want to be the 4th guy instead of the 6th guy. At quarterback or whatever it might be. And there could be a big difference there too. I mean, if you're at the end of the first round or into the second. So, guys like him who are still relatively highly rated, they're not going to be top 5, probably not top 10. But, after that, I mean, a lot of people I talk to say that, and I alluded to what I said earlier, you can, after, let's say you get to pick 10, 15, the next 15 players or the next 30 players, some of them are going to be at the top of the end of the first round, some of the beginning of the second round. And even though overall that's not a huge difference, it certainly is in that first contract. And you obviously want to make it so you're picked as high as possible.
Howard, appreciate you, man. Thanks for some time. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, guys, take care.
Howard Balzer joining us here on Rock and Minucci with Jimmy B. You can follow him on Twitter or X at hbalzer721. Has a great pulse on what's going on with the Arizona Cardinals. Interesting that, he kind of took us behind the scenes in that locker room. I had no idea there wasn't enough lockers
I neither
for this team.
An auxiliary locker room.
Well, you see a lot of the reports, and the guys look really tight like they're there, but you think, well, they're just all standing around.
Yeah,
but,
that's
all right, we'll continue. We got one more to go. Jimmy B from Twin Peaks Camelback.